So welcome to everyone here. We're glad that you chose our session. Our session is, as it says on the slide, reading as a tool for healing. And this session will be a presentation about how beneficial reading is for everyone. And that doesn't matter if you like reading or not. But especially people healing from or surviving trauma. We'll talk about that more in a bit. There is a book for everyone. You probably hear that a lot, but as librarians, we love saying that, and that everyone means you. So you probably have heard some reasons why reading is great, but we think you'll be surprised at some of the ways reading can really improve your life. You'll also hear about some new young adult fiction titles, find a format that works best for you, and learn some mindfulness tips to use if you are triggered or bothered by something in the book that you're reading when you're reading it. And so just a reminder, this session is being recorded, as all sessions for Healing City are. If you have some comments or questions that you don't want to be recorded, but you still want to talk about them offline, please feel free to message either myself or Naila or both of us whenever you want. And we'd love to see your faces if you want to turn your cameras on, but of course that's optional. You don't have to. All right. So with that, let's tell you a little bit about ourselves. So my name is Kim. As you saw, I work in the central branch of the Enoch Pratt Free Library downtown. I manage the Teen Center, which is pretty new. We opened about 4 months before the lockdown happened for the pandemic. I've been a librarian working with youth for about the past 13 years, mostly in California, and now obviously here in Baltimore. I was born on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, but we moved around a lot as I was growing up, all up and down the East Coast. So we were pretty poor and actually homeless more than once. And this will sound cheesy, but it's totally true for me. No matter where we ended up living, the library was always a source of stability for my sister and I. So we were readers from a very young age. It always gave me an escape, a chance to get out of my head, and experience something new and different. Even if the characters were also going through something traumatic, it gave me a point of view from someone who survives it at the end of the story. So that's how it gives you hope. I loved fantasy. My books, and this is going to age me when you look at the title. So my books are on the left of the slide, and fantasy for me, if it doesn't have a dark side, I really don't want to read it. I don't go for the lighter, romance books. So my favorite books are here on the screen. Mine are on the left. Naila will talk about hers on the right. It looks like one of the covers isn't showing up. I'm not sure why. But I loved The Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. Some of you may know the movies or maybe even have read the books, but they were the original Harry Potter. And also Anne of Green Gables, because she's a really strong female character, and she took care of herself, but she also looked out for others. And anything by Judy Blume. If you guys have never read Judy Blume, she's the only author I know of who holds no punches. She writes teens and younger, like tween age kids, exactly as they are. And I remember reading it and just thinking, wow, this is like I'm reading one of my friends talking to me. She didn't dumb anything down. And back then that was a big deal. Geek Love, when I got older, there's some adult books on here too, because I wanted to throw those in. So of course I read all the young adult, but I just decided to put my all-time favorites on here. And those are Frankenstein, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Hurston, and Geek Love. And Geek Love is probably one of the darker, weirdest books. I try not to recommend it to people unless I know they really like that stuff, because it is super dark, but it's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. It's about a family of circus freaks. And of course I have more, but I picked those. And with that, I'll turn it over to Naila to talk about her reading story.
Hi, everybody. My name is Naila Whitaker, and I am the assistant manager at the Northwood branch of the Enoch Pratt Free Library. And I like to say I've been working for Pratt ever since I was a kid. I am a self-proclaimed Pratt kid. I worked for Pratt as a teenager. It's my second job ever as a teen. I came back as a young adult when I was in college, and this is my third time back. So this time I've been here since 2003, I believe. It's been, I guess, like almost 19 years now. It's hard to believe that I've been here this long. I've been a children's librarian, I work circulation, and now I'm a teen librarian and assistant manager. And Kim and I read similarly, but my reading story started much later in life. Elementary school, I could not read. I was struggled with writing, and math was not my strong suit, and I was in special ed. So reading and writing was not something that I did well. And I actually had some educators that told me that I wasn't going to be able to make it and get an education and go to college. Needless to say, things turned out completely different, and I'm a librarian. And so reading did not come naturally for me. Reading was not something that was fun for me. I did not blossom into a reader actually until I became a librarian. It started a little bit as a teenager, but because I struggled with reading for so long, finding a book for me took a little bit longer. But once I found books I loved as a librarian, I just blossomed. I love reading through audiobooks, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Audiobooks is not cheating. You can, sometimes I'll read with the audiobook because I love words and seeing words and hearing how they're pronounced. I love hearing readers read to me. I love diction and voice and tone and things like that. So as readers, if you're struggling with that, you can experience books and completely different formats and still get the joy of reading. My books are heavy in nature also. When I was a child, I didn't see characters that look like me, and I didn't think anything of that until I became a librarian myself. People that had hair that looked like mine, that had experiences like mine. I was a foster child. I wasn't raised by my mother and father. So I love books where there's a hero's journey, where there's a person that is trying to find themselves, discover themselves. I also love seeing what it's like to be another person, living in another country, having a totally different experiences as mine is, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So as you can see, my books vary. They're all people of color in some shape or form, some other life. And I just love that. Maya Angelou, she does not know that, but she is my self-proclaimed grandmother. And I did not know my grandmother. I love Mom, me and Mom. I love that experience that she had. She didn't have a healthy relationship with her mother. Alchemist pulled me out of a dark spot as an adult. All these other books are beautiful. The book that's not showing is called Pet. That's probably one of the darker books that's on here. That book that's really adult, but it has some teen themes. Grown, if you're familiar with the R. Kelly, the whole thing with R. Kelly, that's mimicking the whole thing. A lot of the books that we read are going to be triggering. We're going to talk about how to handle those triggering moments that you have with reading. And Maya Angelou's book, I Know Why the Cage Birds Sing, is the book that triggered me about a month or two ago. I had to pull over to the side of the road and literally scream and cry because something happens to her in the book that really triggered me. And sometimes that will happen to you. So I'll talk to you about how to talk yourself through that, and that it's okay to feel the pain of characters. That makes us human. That doesn't mean that we're broken or anything like that. We're just having a human experience with the character that we're reading. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Naila. So one thing, we're a little bit over time, so we were going to ask you guys a question, but the question, I'll just point it out. The question we were going to ask was, what differences do you notice, other than my older picks, between our reading choices? And the main reason that we're asking that question is to tell you that there really is a book for everyone. And even if, your best friend loved one book and says you have to read this, which I do that all the time to my friends, knowing they're probably not going to like it as much as me, because we all have our own reading styles, our tastes and stories, and mood. It depends on your mood too, like what you're in the mood to read. All right, so now we want to hear a little bit about you. So if you can, you can unmute and just answer whatever comes to mind, or stick it in the chat. You can answer all of these questions or pick one or two, but we'll give you a minute or two to do that.
I'm gonna check the chat too. See if
Okay.
anybody puts anything there.
And be honest. Don't be afraid to be honest. I actually have a class watching the summit here from Reginald Lewis High School. And I asked this question when they came in, and a lot of the class said, we don't read, we hate reading. And we hear this a lot. So don't be afraid to tell us.
I'm happy to start. This is Ashley, so we can move
Sure.
along. I was a reader all the time. I was a library kid growing up. I'm not from Baltimore, but I was a big supporter at a young age at our public library system where I grew up. And as I got older, I am in academia, and so I read a lot for work. So it's gotten less pleasurable, I feel like, as I've gotten older. So trying to find that love of reading again and come back to it is something that I'm striving towards. So those are the barriers, and I'll let somebody else answer. Thanks for the questions.
Thanks, Ashley. And Kevin put in the chat, he loves reading. My all-time favorite book is Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. And I also love that book. I could not put that book down when I read it. And just to bounce off of what Ashley just said too, there are periods in your life where, I've gone through periods where I don't really read much. In fact, one of those periods was in high school because I had so many other things to think about. It was hard to focus. But that's sort of what we're going to talk to you about today too. Colleen writes, I love reading. I just read House on the Cerulean Sea and it is great. Yay. Evelyn loves to read. I love books that I can't put down. It started later in life, 20s. I recently read The Other Side of Paradise and To Selena with Love. I couldn't read in high school and I tried. Nice. Thanks for sharing, you guys. All right. Is there anyone here who hates when someone says you should read more, or has like a negative association to that? And Sarah writes, I love to read, but so much so that I often have a hard time finishing books because I jump around between several different at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my problem.
Okay, so Evelyn, yeah, Evelyn wrote, I'm traumatized by that phrase. You should read more. Yeah, it's and actually, Naila, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we talked about this recently, how someone said that to you, and I was kind of horrified. Like, you just really shouldn't say that to someone, I don't think.
Yeah.
It is kind of traumatizing. And it's for me, it's sort of like an order, like you have to do this. And I'm not someone who does good with being told what to do. So Colleen writes, I have a negative association because it seems pushy. Yeah. Yeah, it is pretty pushy.
It's like someone tell you what to do, like you said, like they know better than you about.
Right. Right. And you do hear this from teachers, maybe not phrased like that, but for good reason. Like reading has a lot of benefits to it, and we'll go into that. But for us as public librarians, we only want people to read for fun. We want, or if you're trying to, learn more about a subject, but only what you're wanting to read. And so when someone comes in and says, I hate reading, but I have to find a book for whatever reason, we love that challenge, because we really want you to love reading, and we want to figure out what the right book is to get you to that point. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain, and basically for anyone actually under 30, your brain is under construction. So parts of our brains are not fully developed until around the age of 26 years, and studies are now showing your prefrontal cortex, which is in the front, not even until you're about 30 is that fully developed. And that is the part that's in charge of your impulse control, decision-making, empathy, and more. But while this part is developing, the amygdala takes over, and that is the emotional part of the brain. So that's why during these years, when I look back at my 20s and my teens, I definitely made all of my decisions based on the emotional mind. And most of us do, because that is the part of the brain that's most active rather than a rational one. So when someone is living through trauma, our brains adapt by growing the parts that control fear and anxiety, and shrinking logical or critical thinking. So the coping mechanisms we learn in trauma survival stay with us and present as things like uncontrollable reactions, acting out, being unable to process or understand consequences, memory loss, and more. So basically the brain is in constant survival mode. So we want to tell you how reading books can actually help with this. And Sarah wrote, wow, I didn't know it was still developing at that point. Yeah, so the 30-year-old point is pretty recent studies. It explains a lot about, well, my 20s anyway, I won't speak for everyone. Okay, so how does reading help in these situations? So you've probably heard the phrase mirrors, windows, and doors, and these are the things reading provides for us. So the mirrors are books allowing us to see ourselves and our experiences. And they also offer windows into other worlds and the experiences of other people and cultures. And that builds empathy and understanding, something that this world can definitely use a lot more of. They also act as doors to allow us to live other stories vicariously, but also safely and from a distance. So a lot of people say, I don't want to read anything sad, but I would say don't shy away from the sad topics. Books that are about things you are going through right now can actually offer a way to learn how others process that information or events like what you're experiencing. For example, YA books like All the Bright Places and We Stay, I Was Here, these all show the levels of grief that people naturally can go through in very different ways. And even though there isn't always a happy ending, there are ways to find your way through it and come out on the other side. Also, what's interesting is horror is really great to read for anyone going through grief or traumatic experiences, as well as dystopian and of course fantasy. They all help people cope with issues in life. And this is because you're taken on someone else's journey where your grief and trauma and pain are recognized, but it's someone else that's going through it, and you're just kind of walking in their shoes as the characters. And you're not alone in that while you're reading the book. And then you also see how that character survives or comes out of it stronger. And that gives hope and reconciliation. But the stories are fantastical enough not to be too close to home. So that won't cause potentially further trauma to the reader. And if you're looking for a great writer of YA horror, young adult horror, Kendari Blake is fantastic. So reading also helps focus the brain on the story being read. One of the issues with survivors of traumatic experiences, which is probably just about everyone in this city, is that when you read a book, I'll preface this by saying during the lockdown, I couldn't read, I couldn't focus, I couldn't get my brain to focus. And as a librarian, that was a little scary. Like I just couldn't get myself through a book. So Naila is going to talk a little bit more about what to do when things like that happen. But I found that I just had to structure myself to get myself back into reading, because reading is the thing that got me my focus back. So it was kind of like a catch-22. When you're reading, you're focusing on the story and nothing else. And you're getting lost in the story. You're focusing on that. So you're training your brain to get back to that mode. It also helps calm you when you read. So it lowers stress. It takes you, again, out of your own head. So you experience the story. It grows memory. Since in order to progress in the story, you have to remember what happened before. And when your brain is fully engaged in the story, this is actually a sort of meditative practice. So this is proven to, as I mentioned, lower the stress, but also anxiety. And when you read characters using their own language to describe their experiences, it helps you learn how to give voice to your own, and maybe even start a conversation with someone you trust and know how to ask for help. Reading lets you validate your own experience while also identifying and exploring options for dealing with the issues that you're having in your own life. And this is how confidence is built. And this may mean not just confidence in yourself, but also in others and the decisions they make as it relates to you. So one really cool thing about reading, and you may all have heard this, but it's actually recommended as a part of therapy for adults exhibiting early Alzheimer's and mental decline, because it physically, literally builds the brain. It keeps the brain from just kind of stagnating, and those parts of the brain we need to function in the world just kind of freezing up and not really working anymore. Reading helps keep those parts alive. Okay. And there is something for everyone. So I'm going to let Naila take over this slide.
I mentioned earlier that I love audiobooks. That was something I discovered later on in life. And I know that a lot of people say, isn't that cheating? Isn't that like not reading? And reading is any way that you can take in information that's good for you. So this is where we're going to talk about different formats. And so a format is just the way you receive a particular type of thing. So reading in this sense, audiobooks could be a book on CD. Back in the day, it was cassettes. Now we have playaways. Those of us that know about Audible, if you come to the library, we have downloadable options through Libby or Overdrive. And we have a couple of other free options to listen to books or even read books, like on a cell phone or tablet or something like that. So there's tons of different ways to read electronically. Graphic novels was something that I had to grow into, but I'll give you some statistics. Believe it or not, all of these formats are improving the way we experience words, and it helps improve our vocabulary and things like that. So graphic novels and manga are working both sides of the brain. Kim talked about how the brain, the cerebral cortex or prefrontal cortex is not developed until much later in life, in our 30s. So just to give you an idea, if you put both your fingers together like this is actually your brain. It's not the size, but this is like the left and right side of your brain. And so this part right here where my fingers are the cerebral cortex, the left and right hemispheres. If you open them up, the amygdala is inside. So whenever you get mad, you flip your lid, it's because you're feeling emotional, you're feeling vulnerable, you're getting angry, you want to strike back, that kind of thing. So you're flipping your lid. So with going back to graphic novels helps us use both the logical side and the creative side to problem solve. You're looking at pictures and you're dissecting the words and you're trying to figure out how those two things mesh. And that's also developing how a person feels and things, characters and things like that. Manga is the same thing. If you're not, I thought I was scared of manga. I love manga. I like different types of manga. I also enjoy graphic novels a lot. You'll discover you may not like superheroes, but you might like more narrative type stories. The same thing for manga. When it comes to ebooks, Overdrive, I can't think of the other platforms we have right now. You can help me, Kim.
Hoopla.
Right now, yes, Hoopla is another way you can download ebooks, and like I said, you can read the book on your screen or you can listen to it on your screen. And large print, for those of us that may need to have the words enlarged, we do have a large print collection in all of our branches. Downtown at the main library has an extensive large print collection. Also, for those of us where English is a second language, we also have books in other languages. If you're reading Spanish, Russian, Italian, any language, some of the more popular languages, we're going to have books for, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, that kind of thing. For the other languages, we may not have, like Farsic or something like that. We may not have books for, but we're slowly ordering them. So just give us time and then we can get those. When it comes to audiobooks, just to give you an example of why audiobooks can be great. If you stop reading during the summer, audiobooks is a great way, especially if you have to read Grapes of Wrath, if you have to read 1984 or something like that, and you cannot get the paperback book, or you're not feeling so inclined to read it right away, get an audiobook. You can plug it in your ears while you're cleaning up your room, while you're mowing the grass. Of course, be safe when you're doing certain things. I drive and listen to books, but that may not be your thing because you have to pay attention to the road and things like that. But it's a great way to multitask or do things that are low, that don't need as much attention, but you can still get things done. So it helps with reading slide. Believe it or not, remember when you were a kid and the teacher read your story and you put your head on the desk and next thing you know, you had this best 30-minute nap. It helps you with bedtime. It helps with summer reading slide. If English is a second language for you, it helps you listen to how words are pronounced, especially if you're reading the book and listening at the same time. It helps increase reading accuracy by 52%. It helps improve comprehension by 76%. Those are just some small statistics that will show you that audiobooks and even other types of reading can be help improve. When it comes to graphic novels, like I said, it's building your brain in different ways, and probably in ways that you don't realize, like your attention to detail and things like that. So let's move on to the next slide. I'm sorry. That's okay.
I'm just gonna quickly go through so how to get started. So I mentioned a little bit before about when teens come in and say, I'm not into reading, or lately I just haven't been into reading, I can't get back into it. I was one of those people, during lockdown, a lot of people I talked to were the same, having trouble with focus. So here's how you can get started, just simple steps. Pick a book, pick any book, pick a book that draws you in. Yes, you can judge a book by its cover. I mean, not literally, the story might be a lot better than the cover, but the cover is oftentimes what draws us to pick up a book. And pick one that you're based on what you're interested in, something that you can relate to. And then create a habit. You hear that a lot these days, but it really is true. It does work. Make time for yourself to read, whether it's 15 minutes before bed, 10 minutes at lunch, whatever it is, create that habit and stick to it, and start small to not overwhelm yourself. Like, don't tell yourself I'm going to read for an hour or even half an hour, because that is a lot. If you're someone who just, has trouble sitting still for that long, even, make it realistic for yourself. Set goals for yourself, whether it's a certain number of pages per day, a chapter every few days, whatever it is. Set those goals and stick to them. You can always change them later. And then environment is important. One of the biggest things for me is environment. What is around me? My home environment is very important. And that's, a lot of that comes from my experiences growing up, where I didn't really have ever a stable home environment, but being out in nature is very soothing and calming for me. So I make sure, I have a window open. I have plants nearby, maybe play some instrumental music in the back, whether it's classical or lo-fi beats or whatever you want to play, something that isn't too distracting, but just sort of like a white noise, like a steady noise in the background. And if you like a book a lot and it's part of a series, well, then that makes it even better, because you can just keep going with the story. So we often will suggest series that have a big hook in the beginning and get you hooked into the story. And then that's an easy way to keep you in the reading frame of mind. And of course, just ask us. Ask your librarian, go into even if it's your school library, your public library, whatever library it is, just come in and ask us. We'll ask you questions like, what do you like to do? We probably will ask, what's the last thing you read that you liked? We will ask you a bunch of questions to get you thinking about what it is you might want to read. All right. Thanks, Kevin. We're a little bit over time, so I'm going to skip the book suggestions right now because I really want to make time for Naila to talk about tips for dealing with triggers.
I know that we don't have much time, so I'll probably just demonstrate a couple of things briefly. And if you want to know more, I am certified as trauma-informed yoga instructor. So if you want to know more information or demonstrate some things with your class or anything like that, I'm more than welcome to. So when it comes to dealing with triggers, breathing, movement, meditation, and other ways are ways to get out of your body, because right now trauma is trapped inside, and there's different types of traumas, which I can always go into later. But what's happening is you're living inside of your head, inside of your body. You're not sure how to release the emotion that you're feeling with what you're reading. So these are a couple of things that you can do to get outside of your body, get outside of your head, to kind of get the blood flowing. So let's say, for instance, you are feeling, I don't know, you're feeling like nervous or whatever, and you want to release some of the anxiousness. So you could kind of just shake your hands. Just say, for instance, I know this feels silly, but sometimes if you're feeling like, oh my goodness, I can't let go of this, this is making me feeling anxious, just shaking your hands. You can start shaking your body, that kind of thing. One thing I do want to demonstrate is the 6, 7, 8 breath. This is really good if you're feeling anxious, you're scared and nervous. You might notice your breath is really short and you're really inside of your head. I'm just going to demonstrate it because we're short on time, and you can try to do it along with me. If it doesn't make sense, you can always contact me and we can demonstrate later on. So 4, you're inhaling for 4. You can hold your breath for 7. If you can't, then that's okay. We can always lower the number. And then you're going to exhale for 8. So let's try holding in for 4. Inhaling for 4, hold for 5, and exhale for 6. So let's change the numbers a little bit. So we're going to inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just counting first. And then we're going to hold for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I just changed the numbers a little bit because, believe it or not, when you're younger, your lungs are not as developed. So this is some physiological stuff you need to understand when it comes to lungs. When you're an adult, we have fully grown lungs, developed lungs, unless you have asthma and things like that. But when you're a child or a teen, your lungs are still developing. So there's a lot of hot air. So let's see if we can do the 4, 5, 6. Remember, I changed the numbers, the 4, 5, 6 breath count. So I'm going to try to do it with you. I'm going to sit up so you can see me a little bit. So let's inhale our normal breath, just exhale. If you're feeling comfortable, let's try it. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you might not have gotten anything out of that at the moment, because I know we're pressing for time, but over time you'll notice that your mind won't be racing as much because you're starting to get your cerebral, your amygdala to slow down, so it's not hijacking your emotions. One other thing you can do if you're feeling sad and you're missing and you want a hug from someone is just simply give yourself a bear hug. That's something simple you can do if you can't find your favorite person to give you a hug. When it comes to meditation, that's something I can also show you. Meditation is not just always about sitting still in a dark room. You can meditate by doing something like writing or drawing or doodling and stuff like that. Other things you can do is journal. You can talk to someone about the books that you're reading, especially if you're feeling sad or triggered. There's a bunch of other things I could talk about, but I know we're pressed for time and we might have some questions. That's it for now. I'm sorry that we're rushing, but there's great ways to help deal with any triggers that you might be experiencing.
So thank you, Naila. Naila is so calming. So we didn't do the book talks. I can go back to that slide so you can see some really great books that kind of draw you in. One is one of Naila's favorites, The Ace of Spades, and that one's actually pretty popular right now. It's available. I think you listened to it as an audiobook, right? And you liked the audio.
I loved the audiobook.
Yeah.
The narrators were amazing.
Okay, so that one's on there. Does anyone have questions or comments? Anything you want to talk about? And again, for those of you that came in later, please feel free to message us or stop in at the Teen Center or the Northwood branch or any branch that's close to you if you like to. But also feel free to message us if there's something that you want to ask offline or talk about. This was really exciting for us to do. We don't, there's never enough people to listen to us talk about why everyone should read. So thanks for being the audience. And let me see if I can go back. Okay, and so these are the books that I was going to talk about, but these are all really great books. The one by Suman Chanani, he's the author of it's a really popular series, The School for Good and Evil. And these are 12 fairy tale retellings, all of them on the darker side, and really good. All right, everyone, I think we are just about at time. So if no one has any comments, I don't see anything in the chat. Thank you guys so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thank you. Bye, everybody.
And I think, Kevin, does it just stop recording on its own, or do we have to, or do you do it? I don't know if Kevin's still here.
It doesn't look like
No.
it. There's 2 other people here now.
Oh, I see it up on the top. Okay. I